Good evening, everybody. Welcome. Thank you for coming out. It is National Library Week. It's National Poetry Month. And if there's one person who can do a great event that encapsulates those things, it's Millie Nash. So let's welcome Millie Nash. Before we get fully underway, though, I want to thank our event sponsors. First, Millie Nash. We also want to thank the Friends of the Burlington Public Library. They've donated a wonderful spread of refreshments tonight and back. After the program, help yourself to those. Or if you already have, that's great too. We have a representative from the Friends, Anne. And you're going to come up and give us a quick little blurb about the Friends and what they do for us. And we're so thankful to have you here.
Thank you. Silly stuffers. Thank you for hearing me. So I'm Ann Brady as Vice President of the Friends of the Burlington Public Library. The Friends is a fully volunteer nonprofit group. All of our fundraising goes to support the library. We're proud to say that we currently fund 2/3 of the library's adult and children's programs. Actually, for last year, we did about $16,000, a little bit over $16,000 of funding to both adult and children's programs. We raise funds through book sales, raffles, and membership. Becoming a member of the Friends is a great way to support the library without a time commitment. Membership envelopes are located the front of the room here on the table. This is you can just pick one up, return it to the library at any time. It can be a good friend for a year, so $25. And if you're a senior, you do get a $5 discount on that. If you have time, we'd love for you to attend our board meetings. They take place in the library the second Monday of every month at 7 p.m. They just show up, or you could check in with the library and send a message to one of us that you're going to come. If you have any questions, I'll be there till the end of the program. If you want any information about the Friends, want me put on the mailing list, just let me know. The other thing I'd like to talk about just for a minute is the book sale. The first weekend in May, we have our annual book sale, and Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. Sunday is buy a bag of books for $10. We fill this entire room with books, and the book sales are the biggest fundraisers of the year for us. So it's a good time if you want to stop into the library. If you have books to donate, we do that the Sunday before, the 27th, bring them in the back door, and we add them to the sale. And that Wednesday night of that week, I think it's the 30th, we do have a preview fundraiser where all the books are $5 and you get the best selection of books. To me, any other information, please let us know, and big great program.
Thank you. All right, and we also want to thank BCAT. BCAT's here tonight in the back covering this program. Thank you so much for coming by. So many more people will get to enjoy this who couldn't make it tonight. I'm going to ask that if everyone in the room could please silence their cell phones, especially because it is going to be recorded for a TV program. We want to make sure that Millie has your undivided attention and no funny ringtones go off midway through. All right. Millie also told me before this event began that she has books she brought. She brought 20 copies of her books. I saw so many of you with them in hand, but if you haven't purchased one yet, she's going to be selling them tonight, autographing them tonight, and she said she's donating all of the proceeds to the Friends. So we're so thankful for that. So thank you. Thank you very much. All right. Welcome, Millie Nash. Millie arrived in Burlington in 1967 and quickly became an engaged citizen. To work or live or come anywhere near Burlington, it won't be long till you hear the name Millie Nash. She initially taught English at Burlington High School, but then she found her calling at the middle school, where she led the innovative BEAM program for over 20 years. In what she describes as one of life's wonderful serendipities, Millie developed a friendship with the celebrated poet Elizabeth Bishop while pursuing her education degree at Harvard. We are so thankful to have her here tonight to share, in her own words, some of her poetry and adventures in writing. Please give a warm welcome to Millie Nash.
Now, should I turn this off? I think
I think you actually want to talk into this so the people in the room can hear you too. This is for the TV.
Oh.
Perfect. Yeah, I know.
Oh my goodness. This is going to be a whole new experience, but I'm not worried because there are so many old young BEAM students here that if I have any problem, I know where to turn. I can remember the only time the Beam group was in this room was one time when the kids were studying poetry, and they had so many wonderful poems that they wanted to do a poetry reading. And so they decided they would have it at the library, and that was fine. And they decided there should be a reception afterwards. By the way, I will try not to talk too long because the refreshments look so good that you're going to say, when's she going to shut up? But at any rate, I was trying to organize the refreshments. Cooking is not my strongest suit, I must say. And finally, somebody who lives 2 doors or 1 door from the library said, Mrs. Nash, frankly, you're not up to the job. She said, could my independent project be the refreshments for the poetry reading? And so we had this was in the middle of winter, we had a watermelon scooped out with all kinds of fancy things. I have never had such GILT by association. Everybody thought I had done it. So I'm not worried because you're here. But I'm so glad that everybody looks familiar, that I should know all of you, and I apologize when you have to explain over and over again. But what can I tell you? At any rate, I am glad you're here because I had a question that I wanted to ask, and it will be curious because I don't think I will see no hands, but how many of you know who Mother Goose was or know Mother Goose rhymes? Okay. The reason I say this is because I went to Harvard and I think I learned 3 things. I shouldn't tell you what they were, but I will digress. I learned where all the restrooms were in Harvard Square. I learned how to park my car on a dime. And I learned that the education I got from a small college in Pennsylvania was plenty okay. But at any rate, when I got into Harvard, I discovered that getting into Elizabeth Bishop's class was something else again because she only took 10 students. And somehow I managed to get into her course, and better than that, we became friends, which was really kind of amazing. But what I loved was the way she taught poetry. She said in poetry, all you needed to do, what we had to do was every week we had to memorize poems. Each week we had a new poem to memorize, and she would call on you anytime, and you had to know the poem from last week and the month before. You had to know all these. Her rationale was that people, her relatives, her parents had both died when she was very young, and she was raised by aunts. And most of them, when they got old, made no sense whatsoever because they had dementia, but they got the poetry right. And so if you're going to listen to someone in their old age, if they can quote poetry, that's better than you might otherwise get. The other thing she said, the only thing you needed to know in poetry was know what all the words mean and know what the pronouns refer back to. And then she summarized what you needed to know to do poetry was everything you need to know about poetry you can learn from Mother Goose. And I think of that continually because in Beam, when I would say, do people know Mother Goose? And they say, what are you talking about? And I'd say, well, Little Bo Peep, and they would finish it off, had lost her sheep. Jack and Jill went up a hill. I said, oh, so when did you memorize these? But they just knew them because they stuck in mind, and I think of that over and over again. So I figured when this book came out, I had nothing to do with it. In fact, I don't remember ever agreeing to do it. It was my nephew who came to visit shortly before COVID, and he said, I've learned how to put books together on Amazon. He said, I put together your dad's history because he had something like 79 or 82 patents that he had created over his life, and he had worked at Newport creating torpedoes during the Second World War, and he always felt so guilty about that from many years afterwards. And I don't remember ever saying yes, but somehow here is the book. And when it came time to do the cover, I had a niece from a different sibling who had done this cover when I published my first book, but she had changed the title of the first book to Darwinian Gardens, and she told me that this is wildflowers. Okay, so I said, when I was trying to think of what to call this book, I said, well, there's so many gardens in here, maybe I should name it Sow Many Gardens, S-O, Many Gardens. And I thought, well, that's such a stupid title. But I thought, but if you make it S-O-W, then you say, so many gardens, and everybody goes, oh, it's a pun. And you know how Beam students are all paranamasiacs. They adore puns. And one of the problems of reading these poems is I certainly realized that so many of the titles, when I would read them to you, would have a pun. For instance, I have a porch poem that I really, really love, and it's called Idle, I-D-Y-L-L. However, when you read the poem, one of the words in the poem is I-D-L-E. You know, it has those of us on the porch while the real world goes to work. And I thought, well, that's not good. So I realized, well, we have to get rid of all the poems that you have to see in order to make sense of. And I keep changing my mind. But more of that. The other thing is that I have lately become familiar with Stephen King. Who would have thought? Who would have thought? But he wrote a book on teaching writing, which I found absolutely, absolutely marvelous. And I've read several others of his books and totally loved them. One of the things he said, not in the writing book, but one of the novels, was about the magic that constitutes writing. It sails you into places never hitherto imagined. And that, for me, is exactly what writing does. I have one poem that starts off, one thing calls another thing to mind, and rambles on. And I'm afraid that my old Beam students will know how it would go every time they come in. I'd have half a sentence, and then either I would interrupt myself or they would interrupt themselves, to the extent, alas, that if anybody had to go to the ladies' room or the gentleman's room, I said, don't raise your hand, because everybody's hand's up all the time. I said, go like that, and you can just know you're on your way. So, but with those things in mind, I thought we would run through some of the poems in each section. The first part is called In the Nook of Time. And I'm going to use that because, in a sense, it's most like Mother Goose. When you hear it, you're going to go, what's that all about? And it's about, first of all, it's a play on the word in the nick of time, which I didn't know what that meant till 2 days ago when I looked it up in my dictionary of idioms and metaphors, which I got at a library book sale at an extremely good price. And the nick of time was in olden days when you were making a point and you wanted to verify it and have proof. You took your axe and you put a nick in the tree to indicate the time and place of what you had said. And I love that because now we don't go nicking trees, but we do have nooks. And at the time I wrote this, I lived in Somerville, and there was a little nook off the kitchen where you kept your canned goods and things. And so I'm going to start because the first section is about poems that I have reflecting on life since my husband died and reflecting back when he was alive. But mostly this poem sings, I hope, and what it means can differ from day to day and from how you're feeling. But if it doesn't sing, I'm not sure it counts as a poem. Oh dear. Okay. In the Nook of Time. Smack in the nook of time, I found much of a, well, let me start. That didn't go well. Smack in the nook of time, I found, more of a much makes love go round. So many shadows gathering dust disappear when ought means must. And quick obey, which I learned in Sunday school a long time ago, is the song of a heart aware and ends as swift as a start. Is tomorrow better than yesterday? Stay in the moment, love would say. Gather ye rosebuds, swallow the moon. Eternity should be starting soon. Though love in the nook of time's enough to call forever's untimely bluff. So, on to Stephen King and his magic of, let me read that again, the magic that constitutes writing. It sails into places you never hitherto imagined. The first poem is called Free Ride. I've been known to be frugal. Some use the nasty word cheap. But be that as it may, this is kind of a metaphor for how my writing happens. And I think that if you write, you will find the same thing. I have so many journals because anytime I have a problem, I put pen in hand and I write, and I just am amazed by what comes out that I don't think I would have thought of. And it's all a free ride. A train of thought rolls in. I hop aboard, delighted by this opportunity to take a track I know I've not explored, to venture forth while traveling for free and all alone along my mind's fjord as words whiz by and flying figures soar into my consciousness. New territory, tunneling beyond where sidetracks trap fresh insights, tacks I'm far less apt to shun than if I kept eyes focused on a map. No station interferes with this vacation. Not once will I be forced to readapt. Perambulation is my destination. That's what writing, I think, is all about. So, what's that have to do with anything? How about if I talk about my town? If you were going to, this sounds like a beam project. Okay, we're going to do our journals today and say, how would you describe Burlington? You know, Thornton Wilder has Our Town. I had a friend, Phyllis Janowitz, who had a poem called Their Town. This is called My Town. Not tucked away, but at an intersection of hurried roads, helping the harried on to seacoast, city, mountains. Here I've stayed. My town's just big enough, with every lot just large enough to jog my contemplation. Who I am involves the lot I've got. I've got a half an acre, 3 sides hedged, and 1 side sloping down toward the street, dead-ended, where I greet the passers-by I meet. My porch rides high behind tall trees, the swing half facing out. My front yard's edged with shade, that metaphor for mysteries. For mysteries exist here without fear. I spy on nearby life, the hawk and owl, groundhog and fox, coyote, turkey, deer, commotions in commotion often caught outside my windows, framing worlds both clear yet overlooking. I love how that works 2 ways. Myriads of plot. A plot crisscrossed by countless roads and scenes intriguing me as on the porch I dwell, sorting my sights and insights formed from travel through a life that now is mostly done. No end of boundlessness, no in-betweens surrounding what's rounding me in Burlington. I like this town so much, I'm not going anywhere. So, what do we have else? I'm going to talk about a night script. Let me see what page 12 if people are looking them up. This is sort of describing one of those wonderful nights that you have once or twice in a lifetime that you remember forever, called Night Script. In dark, by bright bramissimo, the full moon sails against the wind, and night is nothing but a show we are not sure we want to end. The full moon sails against the wind while we drift bedward from a day we are not sure we want to end. Sleep seems to us a castaway while we drift bedward from a day so full as the moon that mounts the sky. Sleep seems to us a castaway, whatever it is that casts its eye, as full as the moon that mounts the sky over the perfectly rounded love. Whatever it is that casts its eye, it seems to be angled from above, too full itself to be envious. It's eager to be a part of us, although its light exceeds our glow. Too full itself to be envious, the high dips down to dance below. Although the light exceeds our glow and night is nothing but a show, the high dips down to dance below by dark and light bramissimo. But then, turn 2 pages and you can read Landscape Alone. What happens? Sometimes alone can be okay, sometimes not so good. In the midst of solitary travel, landscape becomes my companion. With luck, I will marvel at every real encountered garden, no matter that the toads are ceramic. That's from Marianne Moore's poem. And the future problematic. I pick up, ending by ending, the certainty of uncertainty. Stalled, each weight extending the distance I no longer see. I move as a poem does, from now to now, weighted down with what was. What will be is more than a question of will. At best, the lessons of wandering conclude with new insights instilled by the wonder of gathering assumptions drifting with wind. Alone, I comprehend the landscape luck overlooks. And we will start or end that with the Old Gardener, page 29. Old Gardener, if everything I sowed I reaped, I hate to think how high the heaped up consequences I would find encumbering that state of mind which grows by knowing much won't sprout and most can ride bad weather out. It's sometimes good that everything we do does not have the consequences we thought we wanted. Now we get to a second section called Unanswered Questions. And this, I think, was precipitated by the very title, Unanswered Questions, page 43. I often contemplate this. I hope you've thought of this as well. What heaven could I stand to spend forever in? How could a God whose earthly blueprint seems so flawed construct a satisfying end if death is mere penultimate? In lieu of faith, imagination can't quite rise to the occasion. What a hard thing to create. Eternities that satisfy a myopic mortal eye. So naturally, now we need an elegy for answers, right? Okay. Rallied by dreams, my questions lead me on, though not to answers. They have disappeared. In search of certainty, I long ago gave up among the weird assortment of alternatives which vie for credibility. As distant as December stars, bright answers lie outside my reach, though each one has a gleam of possibility which keeps me praising when I'd otherwise lament all that I've lost, except in sleep's transgression of the space-time lens unceasingly. The kingdom of the dead holds answer hostage where my questions fled. I think that means don't give up. So we move on to two epitaphs from a country churchyard. Naturally, if you're going to have to cover the whole set. There are lots of other really boring poems about it, but you'll see I've given this a whole lot of thought. At any rate, the epitaphs in a country churchyard. The first is very familiar, and you see it because it used to be that people worked until they died. And so, at life's surcease, rest in peace, the grave repose kind death bestows on hard lives spent without retirement. But, and I'm going to read the poem and then explain, this is for real folks. But, as life grows easier, something breezier seems desired in those inspired by greater faith for see you later. Near where my parents are buried in a country churchyard in western Pennsylvania, there is a tombstone, and it has two names on it, and the first is the name of a man who died in his early 40s, and under it is the name of what must be his wife with her birth date, and it's left blank, and under it says, see you later. I said, that's the best definition of faith that I have seen in all of my trips through country churchyard. What can I tell you? I'm going to bore you with one more from this. Just when does infinity begin? Because some of you went into mathematical pursuits, which of course I would have been no good helping you on. But this gives me a glimpse of what could be eternity. This is my big philosophical, theological answer to I don't know what. Just when does infinity begin? Grown old, oh, by the way, if you buy the book, work it out, and if I got it wrong, please don't tell me, because I worked on this for months trying to get the math right. Grown old, I see how history has shrunk. At 70, I wrote this when I was 70, which is 16 years ago. At 70, I now not quite a third my country's age. When I was 10, that chunk was less than 6%. For years, I've heard events I claim as my biography called simply dates to memorize by those born in the recent past I label lately. Perspective changes time. It shrinks and grows. What if I lived another 100 years? country, and I'd be 50-50 then. But once I die, percentage downward veers. Though not to nothing, perhaps lives never end once ever is embedded in forever. How's that? So if you want to know, is there a life after death, you just whip out this poem and dazzle people. Maybe the last time you ever see them. The next section is called Sic Transit Gloria Mundi, which I looked up in my quotations in foreign languages dictionary. I have a huge library, and it means thus goes the glory of the world. And I'm only going to read, I think, 2, maybe 3 poems. Mostly these are remembering friends of mine who are no longer alive. And in my family is exceedingly boring, and my friends were far more interesting when they were alive than I make them when they're dead. But I will read my mother and my father's poems because they are so important to me. And for my mother, the poem is titled The Poetry Connection. And I have to tell you that when I was 3 years old, I had ear infections, and I had something called a mastoid operation, which nobody under the age of 80 probably knows about. But it was a very serious kind of thing, and I was in the hospital, and I cried and cried and cried, but my mother would read me poems, and I would stop crying. So when the night nurse had me crying, she read me poems, and I still cried, and my mother said, she doesn't like all the poems. I was probably at my smartest at 3. Oh, well. For Mary Dallas Leonard, born 1902, died 1987. You were my fated muse since I was 3. By then, you had addicted me to words, a fix that quieted my mastoid fears, and after rheumatic fever kept me stirred when dancing was forbidden. The only time you dared send flowers in my name was when my elocution teacher died. Hymns and 100 best poems, not the best of them, I must admit, set me to imitation. A Scottish hobby, time-consuming, cheap. Oh, you were proud and filled the Presbyterian church hall with a crowd the day I spoke. The poetry you never asked to read, trusting the destiny you had decreed. And the poem for my father is called Beyond Goodbyes. He was an engineer, an electrical engineer, worked for Westinghouse all his life, and had something like 79 patents. I used to say I was his first patent, which used to annoy my older brother for some reason. At any rate, that plays into this a bit. This is the poem that was written after he died, and it's talking about my last visit. I've got the wheelbarrow right here behind you, I said to Dad. I'd meant wheelchair. We laughed. He washed his face, quote unquote, without a mirror to view the fall from grace. He noticed that in assisted living places, they don't put mirrors for good reason. He noticed he backed into assisted living's lesser food. A fly eyed our scant lunch. My dad observed the fly, remarked, an engineer'd conclude an eye of that complexity absurd, impossible, the lines like that don't work. The fly buzzed by. I had to hurry on to catch a plane back home. And then death jerked Dad by the hip. In 3 days, he was gone. Eyeing since then so many pesky flies, I speculate on faith Dad's thought provides. It's amazing how you come to conclusion about things by what people say and discuss with you. So if I go on for 6 more minutes, will you kill me? Are you sure? Okay. I kind of like this sister's poem. I have a sister, and I have to keep assuring her it's nothing to do with her personally. This is a sister kind of thing. So if any of you have sisters, you'll perhaps get it. Even after childhood's sisters remained mirrors with attitude. Looking at each other, they see themselves. Only in this mirror, the other, always beyond reach, is often thinner, richer, abler. Envy knots love, a twisted twinning, not easily untied or even seen, one hopes only imagined. The very thought of how they wear each other wearies words. After a fatal fire overheard, the 4-year-old's bold and fretful question when told her older sister'd gone to heaven. How come she gets to do everything? Seems like it's time for Mother Goose. And you know what? I was going to read as a last poem a long, long poem, which is the Sestina, which none of you have probably heard of, although once when an old student visited me on Burlington Common, and he said, "You were my creative writing teacher. I loved the Sestina I wrote." And I was so thrilled that somebody remembered a Sestina that I won't explain it to you, but it's long, and it was about a fox that had a family of foxes in the next door yard to ours. And I thought if there were any little kids in the audience, but all my little kids have grown up. So I will skip that because I don't want to go on too long. And instead, I will read maybe the illumination, because my granddaughter, who is on the back cover with me, because I figured I needed to end with something a little more joyful. The illumination was from an insight she had. When she was 5 or 6, we had gone to the football game. And I live on Sunset Drive, so we just walk over to the football field. And as we're walking home, she's all excited because she said, "Look, I've got 1 shadow, I've got 2 shadows, oh, now I've got 3 shadows." And I was so impressed with that I wrote a poem called Illumination. 1 shadow on a sunny day is all you get. But as you play, it's always underfoot, won't stray, for sun controls the whole charade unless you dive into the shade, where shadows have the power to fade. But shadows know, once nighttime's here, that you're in charge. You make it clear they're welcome as they leap and veer at your command. You come and go past streetlights planted in a row. Now you have 2 shadows, 1 to grow and 1 to shrink. And in between, house lights and porch lights brightly gleam when other shadows join the scene. As you move, your shadows prance. Nothing's left to sun's mischance, and you're the center of their dance. And then, because I did say that Mother Goose Egg Scrambled, I fear 4 pages, because there's Mother Goose Egg Scrambled followed by Father Goose for Adults. I will just, it is fun. This is the kind of thing that, having taught BEAM for many years, it's the kind of thing I probably got the idea from one of you people sitting out there, but I claim them as my own. What can I tell you? So why don't we read, you do know, let's see, I should mention Mother Goose is kind of violent. Remember, like Rockabye Baby on the treetop when the wind blows? Not your most pleasant poem, but I've improved it. The one that got away. Hush-a-bye, baby, a south wind doth blow, while the rest of the family is crowded below in a shoe that's too tight. Now they're starting to fight. Thank heaven you're free to walk all day through atop a tall tree till birds rescue you. And then I will read one very short philosophical Father Goose. Philosophical, from zero to hero and back. Lux track. Think about it, especially if you're having a good day, and maybe if you're having a bad one. And then I will make this my final poem, and if you want to read the sestina about the fox den, which I'm rather fond of, you just have to buy the book and the library will be the richer, and so will you. So anyhow, Robert Louis Stevenson, The Child's Garden of Verses, was one of my real childhood books. I knew so many of the poems. And when Haley, my granddaughter, was born, on her first, second, third, and fourth birthday, I did Haley's Garden of Verses. I was still working at the school where we had a printer and ways that I could make her books, and so there were Haley's Garden of Verses. But then there's Alice in Wonderland, who is one of my favorite literary characters, and in fact, I keep thinking Alice in Wonderland is the perfect Bible for these kind of tumultuous years. Wonderland is where reason doesn't exist and nonsense is in control. Alice's Garden of Verses. A robin with a yellow bill pecked the worm that Jack and Jill let me start again, my pencil started falling. Okay. A robin with a yellow bill pecked the worm that Jack and Jill disturbed while falling down the hill. A fox jumped up and down and squirmed to see Cock Robin grow infirm from that pesticided worm. Peter Piper only picked those vegetables could make him sick. He might as well eat arsenic. Alice longed for salad, thought a garden the most perfect plot for vegetables plus who knows what. But even queens sometimes find roses steeped in red dye. Who discloses all the risk a garden poses? Undaunted, Alice spaded, sowed, encountering bug, worm, and toad as she kept her crops well hoed. Before the produce could be plucked, Alice met her first woodchuck, finishing her lettuce up. Then 24 blackbirds scorned the scarecrow guarding all her corn before poor Alice could be warned. Aphids, rabbits, rain, and worse attacked her verdant universe. To gardens, Alice grew averse. Indeed, to market she did trot. What she could eat might well be bought. She gave that garden no more thought. What a terrible note to end on, but the good news is that the refreshments, if we don't let you go now, Alice will get there first and eat them all. I hope if you're interested in getting a book, the library would be interested in getting your money, and I'm willing to autograph. I did bring a pencil and paper so that you could write your name, because in some of the names I'm not sure I'd spell them right, and I don't want to be thought, although spelling has nothing to do with intelligence, just so you remember. Anyhow, you've been a wonderful audience. It's quite unfortunate that I am stopping, because with an audience this good, I should just keep you here till we all get to see what eternity is all about. Thank you so much.